In the dust-swept town of Dead Horse Gulch, a dangerous game of deception is about to turn deadly. When 5 escaped prisoners swagger into the local saloon, they think they've found an easy target in the quiet girl serving drinks. They couldn't be more wrong. Rose McKenna isn't just another pretty face in a frontier town. For the past decade, she's been the most feared bounty hunter west of the Mississippi, with more dead or alive captures than any marshal in territorial history. They know her as the Ghost, a hunter so elusive most think she's just a legend. This isn't just another Western tale. This is the story of how 5 of the territory's most notorious outlaws learned that sometimes the deadliest predator is the one you never see coming. What follows is the account of how one woman would bring down an entire gang in a single night, using nothing but a saloon girl's smile and the ruthless skills that made her a legend. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Dead Horse Saloon creaked with age, its weathered boards drinking in the last rays of the setting sun. Rose McKenna wiped down the bar with practiced efficiency, her movements deliberate and controlled. Every sweep of her cloth was a study, in precision, much like the way she cleaned her Remington at night, though none of the regulars knew about that particular habit. "Another round, Miss Rose." Old Tom Jenkins raised his empty glass, his grizzled face creased with a paternal smile. He was one of the few locals who treated her with genuine kindness rather than the usual mixture of desire and dismissal that saloon girls typically received. "Coming right up, Tom." Her voice was soft, carefully modulated to blend into the background like everything else about her carefully crafted persona. She poured the whiskey with a steady hand, her green eyes constantly moving, cataloguing details. Most would miss. 3 cowboys at the corner table, trail dust still fresh on their boots, gun belts worn but well-maintained. 2 miners by the window, pay pouches heavy from a recent strike. The piano player Jake, his fingers dancing across yellowed keys, while his eyes wandered where they shouldn't. Rose noted everything, filed it away with the same meticulous care she used when tracking bounties. Sheriff Mills pushed through the swinging doors, bringing with him the scent of sage and horse sweat. His eyes met Rose's briefly, a coded exchange they'd perfected over the past year. The slight tilt of his had told her what she needed to know. The prison break was confirmed. 5 dangerous men had escaped from Yuma Territorial Prison, leaving a trail of dead guards in their wake. "Evening, Miss Rose." Mills tipped his hat, settling into his usual spot at the bar's end. "Quiet day?" "As always, Sheriff." She placed a glass before him without being asked. Their conversations were always like this, seemingly casual, yet laden with meaning. Mills was one of only 2 people in Dead Horse Gulch who knew her true identity, and he'd proven himself a valuable ally. The saloon's owner, Martha Tully, emerged from the back room, her ample frame wrapped in faded silk that had seen better days. "Rose, honey, check the stock in the cellar before the evening rush." It wasn't really a request. Rose nodded, gathering her skirts as she headed for the stairs. The cellar was her domain, though not for the reasons Martha assumed. Behind the rows of whiskey barrels and beer kegs lay a hidden room where the Ghost kept her true possessions, weapons, wanted posters, disguises, and the tools of her real trade. As she descended the wooden steps, Rose reflected on how she'd ended up here. 10 years of hunting the territory's worst had taught her that the best blind spots were the ones people created themselves. No one looked too hard at a saloon girl. They saw what they wanted to see. Someone meek, someone serving, someone they could dismiss. It was the perfect cover for a woman who'd made her reputation by being invisible until the moment she struck. The cellar air was cool and damp, carrying the rich scent of aged oak and spirits. Rose moved a barrel aside, revealing the hidden panel that led to her secret cache. Inside, fresh wanted posters from the marshal's office waited. 5 faces stared back at her, the Yuma escapees. Their leader, Marcus Mad Dog McCall, had a reputation for cruelty that made even hardened lawmen uncomfortable. Rose studied their faces, committing every detail to memory. If her instincts were right, and they usually were, Dead Horse Gulch would be a tempting stopover for men running from Yuma. Remote enough to lay low, but with enough traffic that strangers wouldn't draw immediate attention. The Saloon would be an irresistible draw for men who'd spent years behind bars. Footsteps above made her quickly seal the hidden room. Martha's voice carried down the stairs. "Rose, we need you up here, girl." Coming. She took one last look at her arsenal before heading up, adjusting her demeanor with the same ease that she might change a disguise. By the time she reached the top of the stairs, she was once again the quiet saloon girl, invisible in plain sight. The evening crowd was building, bringing with it the usual mix of cowhands, miners, and drifters. Rose moved among them like a shadow, filling glasses, deflecting wandering hands with practiced skill, all while her trained eyes watched the door. It wasn't a question of if the escapees would show up, but when. Sheriff Mills caught her eye again as she passed, his fingers drumming a subtle pattern on the bar top, their signal that he'd posted watches on the town's outskirts. Rose acknowledged, with the barest nod as she gathered empty glasses. Everything was in place. Now it was just a matter of waiting, something she'd learned to do very well in her years of hunting. The sun had fully set now, and lamplight cast long shadows through the saloon's smoky air. Rose McKenna, the quiet saloon girl, went about her work with demure efficiency, and the Ghost, the territory's most feared bounty hunter, prepared for the hunt to begin. Dawn painted Dead Horse Gulch in shades of amber and gold as Rose made her way through the back alleys toward the saloon. These early morning hours were precious, time to check her network of informants before the town fully woke. Her first stop was always the same, old Samuel at the livery stable. "Morning, Miss Rose," Samuel called out softly, his dark hands working a curry brush over a horse's flank. At 70, the former slave was the town's memory, seeing everything while appearing to see nothing. Had some interesting visitors round. Midnight. Rose paused in the stable doorway, adjusting her shawl. "Interesting how, Samuel?" 2 riders, moving quiet-like. "Stopped just long enough to water their horses." His weathered face remained focused on his work. One had a prison brand, fresh enough to still be scabbing. She slipped him a coin, which disappeared into his vest pocket. "Any direction?" "Headed toward Wilson's Canyon, riding heavy, more than 2 men would need." Samuel's brush never stopped moving. "Might be meeting others, if you take my meaning." Rose filed the information away. Wilson's Canyon was perfect for a hideout, multiple escape routes, good visibility of approaching riders. She'd used it herself more than once when bringing in bounties. The town was starting to stir as she continued her morning rounds. At the telegraph office, young Billy Watson was already at his desk, sorting through the morning's messages. His face brightened when she entered. "Miss Rose, I was hoping you'd stop by." He fumbled beneath his counter, producing a folded paper. "Came through last night. Thought you might want to see it. What with all the talk about those escapees." The telegram was from the marshal's office in Yuma. Rose scanned it quickly. Descriptions of the escaped prisoners, their known associates, likely destinations. But it was the last line that caught her attention. Exercise extreme caution. McCall gang highly organized. Suspected inside help in escape. "Thank you, Billy." She passed him a penny candy from her pocket, their usual exchange. "Any other interesting messages lately?" "Well," he glanced around conspiratorially. "Mr. Harrison at the bank got 3 telegrams yesterday, all from different mining companies. Lots of talk about a big gold shipment coming through." Rose kept her face neutral, but her mind was racing. A gold shipment would be tempting for men like McCall. Perhaps their choice of Dead Horse Gulch wasn't just about laying low. At the general store, Mrs. Peterson was already arranging her window display. The widow's sharp eyes missed nothing that happened on Main Street. "Your usual orders ready." "Dear," she said as Rose entered. Their usual order was more than just supplies. It was information wrapped in everyday gossip. "Martha's been asking questions about you," Mrs. Peterson mentioned casually as she wrapped Rose's purchases. "About your background, your family. Seems mighty curious all of a sudden." Rose's fingers tightened slightly on her coin purse. Martha's curiosity could complicate things. "Some people just like to talk, I suppose." "Indeed they do. Like those two fellows who came through yesterday asking about the town's law enforcement." Mrs. Peterson's voice dropped. "Wanted to know all about Sheriff Mills's habits. His deputies said they were thinking of settling here." Another piece of the puzzle. Rose thanked Mrs. Peterson and headed back toward the saloon, her mind assembling the morning's information. 2 scouts in the night, questions about law enforcement, a potential gold shipment. The picture was becoming clearer. The saloon's back door was unlocked, Martha already inside, preparing for the day. The elder woman looked up as Rose entered, her expression unreadable. "You're out early again, girl." "Just running errands, Mrs. Tully." Rose kept her voice deferential. "Thought I'd get them done before we open." Martha's eyes narrowed slightly. "You do that a lot, don't you? Getting things done when folks aren't looking." There was something in her tone that made Rose pay attention. "Been hearing stories about that bounty hunter they call the Ghost." "Interesting stories." Rose began arranging glasses behind the bar, her movements deliberately casual. "Oh, they say nobody knows if the ghost is a man or a woman." Martha watched her carefully. "Say they can vanish into a crowd, become anybody, rather like you, always slipping in and out, quiet as a shadow." "Sounds like tall tales to me," Rose replied softly, "like most stories in these parts." Martha held her gaze for a moment longer before turning away. "Suppose so. Just interesting is all. How some folks can be more than they appear." The exchange left Rose uneasy. Martha was shrewd, too shrewd to ignore. She'd need to be more careful, especially with McCall's gang likely closing in. The morning's information had confirmed her suspicions. Something big was coming to Dead Horse Gulch. As she prepared the saloon for opening, Rose's mind worked through contingencies. Her carefully maintained cover was starting to show cracks, just when she needed it most. But then she hadn't become the ghost by being predictable. Sometimes the best way to hide wasn't to run from suspicion, but to dance with it, letting people see just enough to make them doubt their own conclusions. The first customers would arrive soon. Rose McKenna, the quiet saloon girl, would be ready for them, and the ghost, ever watchful, would be ready for whatever else the day might bring. The afternoon lull at the Dead Horse Saloon gave Rose the opportunity she needed. With Martha occupied in town and the few remaining customers dozing over their drinks, she slipped down to her secret room in the cellar. Here, alone among her true possessions, she could shed the mask of the demure saloon girl. Her fingers traced the worn leather of her bounty hunter's gear, clothes chosen for function rather than fashion, gun belts that had seen more use than her serving apron ever would. A wall of wanted posters told the story of her real work, faces crossed out one by one, each representing a capture that had built the legend of the ghost. Rose settled at her small desk, pulling out a weathered journal. Inside, detailed notes tracked her current investigation. The McCall gang's escape wasn't random. The timing lined up too perfectly with the upcoming gold shipment. Her sources in 3 territories had been reporting increased activity among McCall's old associates. For weeks before the breakout. "You're getting sloppy, Marcus," she muttered, studying McCall's wanted poster. She'd crossed paths with him 5 years ago in New Mexico, though he'd never seen her face. She'd been tracking one of his lieutenants when the trail led her to a larger operation. Back then, she'd chosen to withdraw and gather more information. Now, it seemed, she'd get another chance. A false bottom in her desk drawer revealed letters from Marshal Cooper in Yuma. They'd worked together for years, building a partnership based on trust and results. His latest correspondence confirmed her suspicions about the prison break. Internal investigation suggests high-level corruption. 2 guards disappeared same night as escape. McCall had outside help, professional. Watch yourself. He's not the same man you knew. Rumors say he's made powerful friends. Rose added the letter to her file, her mind working through the implications. McCall had always been dangerous, but organized crime was something new. It suggested backing from bigger players, possibly reaching as far as San Francisco or even Chicago. She changed quickly into her riding clothes, keeping an ear out for movement above. This wasn't just about capturing escaped prisoners anymore. There was something larger at stake. If McCall had really formed alliances with major criminal organizations, Dead Horse Gulch could become a battleground. A hidden compartment in the wall held her specialized equipment, lock-picks, disguised materials, tools of stealth and deception. That had served her well over the years. She selected a few essential items, concealing them carefully in her regular clothes. The next few days would require quick access to both her identities. Rose paused at her weapons rack, considering her options. The delicate derringer hidden in her garter was fine for saloon work, but inadequate for what was coming. She chose a pair of Colt peacemakers, reliable, accurate, and most importantly, able to be concealed under her serving dress with the right modifications. A floorboard creaked above, and Rose froze. Years of experience had honed her instincts. Something was off. The step pattern was wrong for Martha or any of the regulars. Moving silently, she extinguished her lamp and pressed herself against the wall beside the hidden entrance. More footsteps, trying to be quiet but unfamiliar with the saloon's quirks. Rose's hand moved to her weapon as the cellar door opened. Light from above cast long shadows down the stairs. Sure she went down here. A man's voice, rough with whispered tension. Yeah, saw her heading down while you were watching the front. Another voice, younger, probably getting more bottles for the bar. Rose smiled grimly in the darkness. Scouts, most likely, advance men from McCall's gang, checking out the saloon. Their carelessness in following her was telling. They didn't expect any real resistance from a saloon girl. She waited, controlling her breathing as they descended the stairs. Their attention was focused on the rows of bottles and barrels, missing her position in the shadows. These weren't experienced men. Their movements were sloppy, their situational awareness poor. Nothing. Here, the first man grumbled. Just storage. Should we check the bottles? Might be something worth taking. Later. McCall wants us to focus on the layout for now. Remember the plan. They retreated upstairs, never realizing how close they'd come to discovering the ghost's lair. Rose waited several minutes after they left before moving, her mind already adapting her plans. Their presence confirmed her timeline. McCall would move soon, likely within days. Returning to her desk, she penned a quick note to Sheriff Mills, encoding it in their private cipher. The message was simple. Wolves at the door. The hunt begins. She'd slip it to him during his evening visit to the saloon. Rose changed back into her serving dress, checking that every weapon was perfectly concealed, every lockpick and tool hidden but accessible. The quiet saloon girl would return upstairs, serving drinks with her usual gentle smile. But now, beneath that smile, the ghost was fully awake and preparing for war. The game was changing. McCall and his men thought they were the hunters, using the saloon as their staging ground. Soon, they would learn what others had discovered too late. In Dead Horse Gulch, the prey they stalked was actually the predator. The sun had just dipped below the horizon when they arrived. The saloon's evening crowd fell silent as 5 men pushed through the swinging doors, bringing with them the stench of sweat and prison dust. Rose recognized them instantly from their wanted posters, though she kept her eyes downcast as she wiped the bar. Marcus Mad Dog McCall led the group, his prison-pale skin making the scar along his jaw stand out like a white snake. Behind him came the others, brothers Jim and John Hawkins, knife experts with a reputation for excessive violence, Frank, the Professor Williams, whose sophisticated manner masked a murderous nature, and lastly, Peter Pike Morrison, a mountain, of a man whose massive fists had crushed more than one prison guard's skull during their escape. "Well, well," McCall's voice carried across the suddenly quiet room. "Ain't this cozy?" His eyes swept the saloon, lingering on Rose with predatory interest. "Been a long time since we had the pleasure of female company." The regular patrons began to quietly excuse themselves, leaving money on tables and edging toward the doors. Old Tom Jenkins caught Rose's eye, his weathered face tight with concern. She gave him the slightest shake of her head, a warning to leave while he could. "Drinks," McCall announced, dropping onto a bar stool directly in front of Rose. "For me and my associates." His smile never reached his eyes. "Your finest whiskey, darling. We're celebrating our recent release." Rose moved with deliberate timidity, letting her hands tremble slightly as she set out glasses. Every gesture was calculated to reinforce their assumptions about her, just another frightened saloon girl, no threat to anyone. "Mighty pretty thing, ain't she?" Jim Hawkins leered, reaching for her arm. Rose allowed the contact, though her muscles coiled instinctively. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Rose," she whispered, using a voice higher and softer than her natural tone. "Rose McKenna." "Rose." McCall rolled the name around his mouth like the whiskey he was drinking. "You work here long, Rose?" "2 years, sir." She kept her eyes down, noting their weapons with peripheral vision. Prison-made shivs poorly concealed under borrowed clothes, except for the professor, who carried himself like he had proper gunfighter's gear hidden beneath his coat. Pike Morrison laughed, the sound like rocks in a grinder. "Sir, listen to them manners, boys. Bet we could teach her some new ones." Martha emerged from the back room, taking in the situation with experienced eyes. "Rose, go check the cellar stock." Her voice carried a warning. "Get out of sight." "Oh, she stays." McCall's hand shot out, grabbing Rose's wrist. "We're just getting acquainted. In fact—" He pulled her closer, his prison-sour breath hot against her ear. "Why don't you join us for a private celebration later?" Rose let real fear show in her eyes, though not for the reasons they assumed. At this range, she could feel the bulge of hidden weapons beneath his coat. They'd already rearmed. Someone in town was helping them. I should really see to the other customers," she stammered, playing her role while cataloguing details. Gun oil on the professor's sleeve, fresh horse's hair on Pike's boots, military-grade holster straps visible under Jim's jacket. This was no random stop for escaped prisoners. They were equipped for something bigger. "What other customers?" John Hawkins sneered, gesturing at the now empty saloon. The last regular had slipped out moments ago, leaving only Martha watching. Helplessly, from behind the bar, McCall's grip tightened painfully on Rose's wrist. "Looks like it's just us now, darling, and we've got so much catching up to do." Rose allowed a single tear to roll down her cheek, her free hand trembling as she reached for the whiskey bottle. Every sign of weakness was a carefully crafted lie, every moment of fear a calculated performance. Let them think they had power. Let them think they were in control. Behind her modest serving dress, the peacemaker pressed reassuringly against her ribs. Soon, they would learn what others had discovered too late, that fear could be the deadliest weapon of all, especially when it was misdirected. McCall's grip hadn't loosened, but Rose's mind was racing through scenarios with professional precision. The situation was deteriorating faster than expected. She needed to establish boundaries without revealing her true capabilities. Please. Sir, she whispered, her voice perfectly pitched to carry to Martha. You're hurting me. Am I? McCall's smile widened. Maybe that's the point, darling. Maybe. The whiskey bottle in Rose's trembling hand slipped, shattering on the floor. The sound made Pike jump, his massive frame knocking against the professor, whose coat swung open just enough to reveal what Rose had suspected. A gunfighter's rig military issue. Not prison contraband or local stock. Careful there, friend. The professor adjusted his coat with practiced ease, but Rose had seen enough. The holster's distinctive brass fittings marked it as army equipment, the kind that didn't go missing by accident. Clumsy little thing, aren't you? John Hawkins reached across the bar, his fingers heading for Rose's face. She calculated angles, knowing she could break 3 of his fingers before he realized what was happening. Instead, she let him stroke her cheek, though her skin crawled at the touch. I'll clean it up, she offered, trying to pull away from McCall's grip. His fingers tightened painfully, and for a moment, Rose saw a flash of the sadist from his wanted posters. The man who tortured 3 marshals to death during a bank robbery in '78. Jim. McCall nodded to the younger Hawkins brother. Check the cellar. Make sure we've got proper privacy for our celebration. Martha stepped forward, her face pale but determined. Now, see here. The professor's movement was smooth, practiced. Suddenly a Colt appeared in his hand, though he kept it low and close to his coat. Ma'am, I suggest you retire for the evening. We'll see to your girl's professional development. Rose watched Jim Hawkins descend the cellar stairs, knowing he was moments away from discovering her hidden room if she didn't act. Time to show just enough of her hand to change the game. She stumbled deliberately, letting her weight pull against McCall's grip. The motion brought her hip against the bar's edge, exactly where she'd positioned a concealed derringer during her afternoon preparations. Steady now, McCall laughed, yanking her roughly. But Rose had already palmed the small weapon, letting it slide into the folds of her skirt. Boss! Jim's voice carried up from the cellar. You might want to see this. Found something interesting behind the barrels. Rose allowed real tears now, not from fear, but from the cold calculation of what had to happen next. She couldn't let them find her equipment, her records. The legend of the ghost depended on anonymity. Well then, McCall stood, pulling her toward the cellar stairs. Let's all go see what secrets our little Rose is hiding. The professor moved to follow, but Pike's deep voice stopped him. Someone should watch the door. Sheriff usually makes rounds about now. Rose noted the exchange. They had studied the town's patterns. This wasn't just random harassment. They were following a plan. At the top of the cellar stairs, McCall shifted his grip to Rose's upper arm. The movement created a split second where his balance was vulnerable. A proper bounty hunter would have used that moment to take him down. Instead, Rose stumbled again, this time letting the tiny derringer press against his side. Please, she whispered, but this time her voice carried steel beneath the fear. Don't make me go down there. McCall stiffened, feeling the gun. His eyes narrowed as he reassessed her, but before he could react, horses' hooves thundered outside. Riders coming! Pike's warning carried urgency. Looks like the sheriff's patrol! The professor's gun disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Marcus, we need to stick to the timeline. McCall's grip loosened, his eyes still locked on Rose's face. She let him see just a flicker of something behind her fear, enough to make him wonder, not enough to be sure. Later, he promised, his voice carrying both threat and intrigue. We've got time to solve all your mysteries, darling. As they retreated through the back door, Rose allowed herself a small, secret smile. The derringer had been empty, a calculated risk to plant the first seed of doubt. Let them wonder about the scared saloon girl with a hidden gun. It would make their eventual discovery of her true identity all the more devastating. After the saloon closed, Rose slipped through the shadows of Dead Horse Gulch like a ghost. The night belonged to her now, as it had for the past decade. Her simple dress was gone, replaced by dark riding clothes that let her move like smoke. Between buildings, 10 years of hunting the West's most dangerous criminals had taught her the value of darkness. Sheriff Mills waited in his office, lamp turned low. "Saw our friends made their appearance," he said, as Rose entered through the back window, their usual meeting spot. "Couldn't intervene without tipping our hand. They're planning something bigger than we thought." Rose pulled the professor's military holster sketch from her pocket. "Army issue, latest model. Someone's providing serious backing." Mills studied the drawing. "Military connection explains a few things. Had a telegram from Fort Gibson last week. Entire shipment of weapons. Went missing. Inside job, very professional." Rose paced the small office, her mind assembling pieces. The gold shipment's a target, but not their main objective. McCall's crew isn't usually this organized. Someone's pulling strings. "Speaking of strings," Mills opened his desk drawer. "Got something you should see." He handed her a wanted poster. Not one of the escapees, but a face Rose knew all too well. "Colonel James Hartford," she breathed, memories flooding back. "He was Army intelligence before he went rogue. I tracked him 2 years ago after the Kansas City bank heist, but the trail went cold." "Not anymore." Mills tapped the poster. "Reports place him in San Francisco 3 weeks ago, meeting with railroad executives. Same executives handling the gold shipment security." Rose's hand unconsciously touched the scar on her shoulder, a souvenir from her last encounter with Hartford. "He's the one backing McCall. Military equipment, inside information, professional planning, it all fits." "There's more." Mills lowered his voice. "Remember that bounty you brought in last spring, the one who worked Hartford's crew?" "Jacob Pine," Rose nodded. "He talked about a major operation Hartford was planning. Something about changing the whole game out west. Pine was found dead in his cell yesterday, throat cut clean. Professional job." Rose's eyes narrowed. "Hartford's cleaning house. Whatever he's planning, it's happening now." She moved to the window, watching moonlight paint silver edges on the town's buildings. Her mind slipped back 10 years, to the night she'd first become the ghost. She'd been young then, naive, working as a scout for the Marshal's service. The assignment had gone bad. 3 marshals dead. Her partner betrayed by someone high up in the government. She'd learned then that some predators wore badges and that justice sometimes required working in shadows. "They almost found my cash. Today," she told Mills, "had to show a little steel to keep them out of the cellar." "Risky. McCall's no fool." "No, but he's arrogant. Men like him see what they expect to see." Rose smiled grimly. "Right now they're seeing a scared saloon girl with a tiny gun. Let them wonder about that. It'll make them sloppy trying to figure me out." Mills nodded slowly. "What's your play?" "Hartford's the key. He doesn't make moves without multiple layers of planning. The gold shipment, the weapons, they're just pieces of something bigger." Rose's voice carried the cold certainty that had made her legend. "I need to get inside their operation. They'll be watching the saloon now after that gunplay." "Good." Rose checked her weapons. Proper ones now, not just the small derringer she'd shown McCall. Let them watch, let them think they're the hunters. Every hour they spend trying to intimidate a saloon girl is an hour I can use to dismantle their operation. She detailed her plan to Mills. It was dangerous, walking the line between prey and predator, but it was the kind of dangerous she'd specialized in for years. The ghost hadn't earned her reputation by kicking down doors or calling men out into the street. She'd earned it by being the shadow they never saw coming, the threat they never recognized until it was too late. "Be careful," Mills warned as she prepared to leave. "Hartford's not like the others you've hunted. Man's got ice in his veins and friends in high places." Rose paused at the window, moonlight silvering her profile. "So did the last 3 men. Who underestimated me. Their bounties paid just the same." She smiled, but it wasn't the demure expression her saloon customers knew. This was the smile that had made hardened killers wake screaming in their cells. Time to remind these gentlemen why they call me the Ghost. Dawn found Rose in her element, moving through Wilson's Canyon like a shadow. She'd tracked the gang's trail from Samuel's information, noting how their horseshoes had been deliberately modified to mislead, another sign of Hartford's influence. Amateur trackers would follow the false trail east. Rose followed the subtle signs they'd tried to hide. The gang's hideout was exactly where she'd expected. An abandoned mining shaft high in the canyon walls, defensible, multiple escape routes, and easy to watch approaching visitors. From her hidden observation point, Rose counted at least 3 armed guards positioned among the rocks. Professional work, military-style rotations. "Getting sloppy, Hartford," she whispered, noting how the guards favored their right sides, army cavalry training showing through. Her field glasses revealed fresh supplies, including crates with military markings. They weren't just hiding. They were preparing for something big. Movement at the cave entrance caught her attention. The professor emerged, engaged in intense discussion with a well-dressed stranger. Rose's breath caught. She recognized that straight-backed military bearing, Colonel Hartford himself, looking exactly as he had 2 years ago in Kansas City. The scar she'd left across his cheek was still visible. Their conversation seemed heated, Hartford gesturing at a map while the professor shook his head. Rose was too far to read lips, but their body language told enough. Something wasn't going according to plan. Back in town, the Dead Horse Saloon was just opening for the day. Martha watched Rose suspiciously as she emerged from the cellar. No doubt wondering about yesterday's events, felt safer sleeping down there, Rose offered meekly, maintaining her cover. "After those men," Martha's face softened slightly. "Can't blame you for that. But girl, we need to talk about that gun they say you had." Rose let her shoulders slump, eyes downcast. "My pa insisted I carry it before he died. For protection. I've never even fired it." "Good morning, ladies." The professor's cultured voice cut through their conversation. He stood in the doorway, now dressed in an expensive suit that would have looked at home in San Francisco's finest establishments. "I trust we're ready for business." Martha stiffened but nodded. "We're open." "Excellent." He settled at the bar, positioning himself to watch both the room and the street. "Miss Rose, if you would." He gestured at the whiskey bottle. Rose played her role perfectly, letting her hands tremble slightly as she poured. The professor watched her with calculated interest, but his attention kept straying to the street outside. He was waiting for something. The answer came an hour later. 3 men in railroad company uniforms entered, carrying surveying equipment. Rose recognized the lead man from wanted posters, Sebastian Cross, expert safecracker disguised as a railroad engineer. The professor engaged them in loud, casual conversation about railway routes and property values. But Rose, wiping tables nearby, caught the hidden exchanges. Papers passed under tables, whispered passwords, coded gestures she recognized from Hartford's known operations. "Heading up to survey the pass tomorrow," Cross announced clearly. "For the benefit of any listeners, have to check grades and elevations before any track can be laid." The professor made a show of interest, but Rose saw the real message in the way Cross tapped his fingers. Tomorrow, pass, elevations. They were coordinating positions for something. Late afternoon brought more pieces of the puzzle. 2 army supply. Wagons rolled through town, their drivers' uniforms just slightly wrong, in ways only someone with Rose's experience would notice. They were headed toward Wilson's Canyon, allegedly for a cavalry patrol, but Rose knew better. In her cellar sanctuary, that evening, Rose updated her wall of intelligence. String-connected points on maps, tracking movements and patterns. Hartford was positioning men throughout the region, all converging on Dead Horse Gulch. The gold shipment was part of it, but the military equipment, the surveying teams, the coordinated movements, this was something larger. "Got more news," Sheriff Mills whispered during his evening visit to the saloon. Telegraph operator in Preston's Crossing went missing last night, all the messages from the past week gone with him. Rose nodded imperceptibly, serving his usual whiskey. Hartford's covering his tracks. Preston's Crossing is the last telegraph station before the pass. Army patrol's been acting strange too. Routing changes, supply requisitions that don't match. Their numbers. He's got people inside the army, Rose concluded. High-ranking ones. Mills left her with one last piece of information. Stage arrived today. Got a passenger asking questions about you. Real subtle-like, but wanting to know all. About the quiet saloon girl. Rose kept her expression neutral as she watched the professor at his usual spot. The game was shifting. They were investigating her even as she investigated them. The next few days would be a delicate dance of hunter and hunted, with neither side entirely sure which was which. As night fell over Dead Horse Gulch, both Rose and her quarry prepared for tomorrow's moves. But while they watched her, thinking they had the upper hand, the ghost was already 3 steps ahead, setting up. A trap they wouldn't see until it was too late. Midnight oil burned in Rose's hidden cellar room as she prepared for war. The mask of the timid saloon girl was set aside, replaced by the calculated precision of the ghost. Her arsenal accumulated over years of hunting the West's most dangerous. Criminals lay spread before her on the workshop table. "Time to wake up, old friends," she murmured, checking each weapon with practiced care. A matched pair of Colt peacemakers, their grips worn smooth from use, modified for silent action, perfect for close work. A Henry rifle with custom sights for distance shooting. The unusual British Webley revolver she'd taken from a bounty 2 years ago, valuable for its distinctive sound that could be used to mislead pursuers. But firearms were just the beginning. Rose's real advantages lay in her specialized equipment. Lockpicks disguised as hairpins, a corset lined with thin steel plates, protection that wouldn't show under her dress, boot knives balanced for throwing, wire garrots hidden in hair ribbons. Every piece had a story, every tool tested in the field. The false bottom of her weapon chest revealed her masterwork, a collected dossier on Hartford's operations spanning 3 territories, notes, maps, witness accounts, and a network of contacts that had taken years to build. She'd been hunting him longer than anyone knew, gathering string after string that could finally bind the spider at the center of it all. "Got something you need to see." Sheriff Mills's voice came softly from the cellar stairs. She'd given him the only other key to her sanctuary months ago, a rare trust earned through proven loyalty. He carried a wooden box, military issue. "Found this hidden in the back of Cross's surveying wagon. Boys made a nice distraction while I took a look." Rose opened the box carefully, her eyes widening slightly. Inside lay engineering plans for the railroad's gold transport carriages, including detailed schematics of their security systems. But it was the second set of documents that caught her attention. "These are Army payroll routes," she said, studying the marked maps. "Supply line schedules, patrol patterns. Hartford's not just after the gold shipment. He's planning to cripple military operations across the whole territory. Taking out communications, controlling the passes, hitting supply lines." Mills nodded. "Man's planning an empire, not just a heist." Rose's mind raced through implications. The gold's their war chest. With that much capital and the army temporarily paralyzed, Hartford could establish control over the entire region before reinforcements arrive. She moved to her planning wall, adding new strings to connect pieces of intelligence. That's why he needs McCall's crew. They're not just muscle, they're experienced train robbers. The professor's tactical knowledge, the Hawkins brothers' explosives experience, Pike's raw power. Hartford's building a private army. Question is, Mills watched her work, how does one bounty hunter stop an army? Rose smiled, the dangerous smile that never appeared on the saloon girl's face. She opened a hidden panel in the wall, revealing her most specialized equipment. The same way the ghost always works, not with force, but with fear. She removed items one by one, explaining her plan. Flash bombs designed to disorient without killing, smoke capsules that could fill a train car in seconds, tiny glass vials of concentrated liquor that could incapacitate a man with one breath. Hartfords. Men are professionals, but they're used to fighting regular opponents. They've never faced someone who can appear and disappear at will, strike from impossible angles, turn their own fear against them. Her fingers traced a peculiar device, a small mechanical contraption of her own design. This attaches to a train's undercarriage. When triggered, it mimics the sound of breaking coupling pins, makes men jump from moving trains when nothing's actually wrong. Mills shook his head in amazement. You've been planning this for a long time. Hartford's been my white whale, Rose admitted. 2 years ago in Kansas City, I got close, had him in my sights. Her hand unconsciously touched the scar on her shoulder. He was better prepared than I expected. This time will be different. She began selecting equipment, arranging it for quick access. Some pieces would be hidden around the saloon, others in caches along likely escape routes. The Ghost's true power wasn't in weapons, but in preparation. They'll make their move soon, she said, checking the mechanism on a compact grappling hook. The gold shipment leaves Denver in 2 days. Hartford will want his pieces in position. Before then? And the saloon girl? Mills asked. How long can you maintain that cover? Rose's expression turned predatory. Just long enough to let them think they have me cornered. Sometimes the best trap is letting your enemy think they're springing their own. She closed the arsenal's hidden panel, each weapon and tool now assigned its role in the coming operation. The timid saloon girl would return upstairs, serving drinks with trembling hands. But now, hidden throughout the Dead Horse Saloon, the Ghost's instruments of justice waited silently for their moment to strike. The Dead Horse Saloon grew crowded as evening approached, filled with both its regular patrons and Hartford's men, poorly disguised as railroad workers and travelers. Rose moved among them like a shadow, playing her role while listening to every whispered conversation, noting every concealed weapon and coded exchange. McCall sat at his usual corner table, watching her with predatory interest. His men had taken to surrounding her whenever possible, creating a gauntlet of unwanted touches and whispered threats she had to navigate while maintaining her frightened facade. "Another bottle, darling," McCall called out, his smile cruel. "And this time try not to drop it." Rose approached their table, feeling the weight of her hidden Webley revolver against her ribs. One quick draw and she could end this now, but that would spoil the larger hunt. Instead, she let her hands shake as she poured, spilling a few drops. "Careful there." The professor caught her wrist, his grip expertly placed to cause pain without leaving marks. "We wouldn't want any accidents." "No, sir," she whispered, noting how his sleeve rode up to reveal fresh ink on his wrist, numbers and letters in a military code she recognized from Hartford's previous operations. Another piece of intelligence gathered. Pike's massive form suddenly blocked her retreat. "Think it's time we had that private celebration we talked about." His breath stank of cheap whiskey, but his eyes were cold and calculatingly sober. I need to serve other customers," Rose stammered, letting real tears form. Every moment of fear they saw was carefully calculated to reinforce their sense of power. "The girl stays here." McCall's voice carried authority that even Pike respected. "We've got business to discuss, and I want to make sure she hears every word. Maybe it'll help her make the right choice when the time comes." Rose found herself forced into a chair between McCall and the professor. Around them, Hartford's men shifted positions, creating a screen from casual observers. She recognized the tactical formation. They were about to discuss something important. "Tomorrow's a big day," McCall said conversationally, but his eyes never left Rose's face. "Lots of changes coming to Dead Horse Gulch. Shame if anything happened to that pretty face of yours during all the excitement." "I don't understand." Rose whispered, while her trained mind catalogued every detail. Tomorrow. The gold shipment wasn't due for another day, which meant, "Oh, I think you do." The professor's cultured voice carried an edge of steel. "That little derringer of yours suggested someone with interesting ideas about self-defense. Made us wonder what other surprises you might be hiding." Jim Hawkins leaned forward, flashing the knife he constantly toyed with. "Boss thinks you might be more than just a scared little barmaid. Me? I think we should find out right now." Patience. McCall's command stopped Jim's advance. "Let's give our friend time to consider her position. By this time tomorrow, a lot of people in this town are going to wish they'd chosen their loyalties more carefully." Rose let tears fall, her body trembling, a perfect performance of terror that concealed her racing mind. Their conversation confirmed her suspicions. Hartford was moving before the gold shipment arrived, using its approach as misdirection for something bigger. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking perfectly. "I'm just a saloon girl. I don't want any trouble." "Trouble's already here, darling." McCall traced a finger down her cheek, and Rose forced herself not to break his hand. "Question is, are you smart enough to stay out of its way?" Martha appeared at the table, her face tight with concern. "Rose, I need help in the cellar." "She stays." McCall's voice was flat. "She works for me." Martha stood her ground, showing unexpected spine. "And I need her now." The standoff lasted several heartbeats before McCall smiled coldly. "Of course. Business is business. But hurry back, Rose. We've got so much more to discuss." Rose stumbled away from the table, maintaining her frightened demeanor until she reached the cellar stairs. Only then did she allow herself a small, dangerous smile. Their attempts to intimidate her had revealed more than they knew. Tomorrow's timing, Hartford's misdirection strategy, and most importantly, their growing suspicion about her true nature. Let them suspect, she thought, descending into her hidden sanctuary. Let them waste time watching the scared saloon girl while the ghost prepared to strike. By the time they realized their mistake, it would be far too late. Rose's night was far from over. After her confrontation with McCall's gang, she slipped through Dead Horse Gulch's moonlit streets, tracking Hartford's men as they moved supplies and positioned lookouts. Each group she observed revealed another piece of tomorrow's plan. The railroad office had become their temporary headquarters, its windows glowing well past midnight. Through her field glasses, Rose watched the professor meet with Hartford himself, their gestures suggesting disagreement. More interesting was the parade of visitors. Army officers, telegraph operators, even the bank manager, all arriving separately but clearly part of the same conspiracy. "Quite a gathering," Sheriff Mills whispered, joining her in the shadows. "Hartford's got half the territory's officials in his pocket." "More than half," Rose replied, noting another arrival. "That's Judge Morrison from Carson City. He's the one who signed McCall's gang's original prison commitments. Corrupt judge explains the easy breakout." Mills handed her a telegram he'd intercepted. "They're shutting down rail service tomorrow. Track maintenance, supposedly." Rose studied the message, adding it to her mental map. "Isolating the town. No trains means no quick communication with the outside world." She paused, catching movement near the bank. "They're moving now. 3 men, carrying survey equipment." But these weren't Cross's surveyors. Rose recognized their practiced movements. Demolitions experts, probably planning to breach the bank's walls during tomorrow's operation. Hartford was coordinating multiple strikes simultaneously. "Need to get back," she said, checking her timepiece. "McCall's men will be watching for me." The saloon was still busy when she returned through the back door, quickly resuming her role as the frightened barmaid. But now she moved with calculated purpose, each nervous gesture designed to draw attention, while she positioned her hidden weapons and tools throughout the building. "There you are." Martha caught her arm. "Those men been asking about you." Getting impatient, Rose let her fear show, though not for the reasons Martha assumed. Did they say what they wanted? "Nothing good, girl." Martha's face showed genuine concern. "Maybe you should stay at my place tonight." "Can't run forever," Rose whispered, her words carrying more truth than Martha knew. McCall's gang watched her closely as she resumed serving drinks. They'd positioned themselves strategically around the saloon, another sign of Hartford's military training influencing their tactics. The professor sat near the window, his attention split between the street and Rose. Jim Hawkins lounged near the back door, playing with his knife but really controlling the exit. Pike's bulk dominated the bar, while John Hawkins watched the stairs to the cellar. They were boxing her in, limiting her movements while maintaining an appearance of casual menace. Professional work if you were dealing with an ordinary target. "Getting late," McCall commented as she passed his table. "Might need an escort home, darling. Dangerous times for a lady alone." Rose flinched appropriately, but her mind was marking positions and planning moves. They'd try to follow her tonight, maybe even attempt to grab her. She'd arranged for that, leaving false trails and prepared surprises throughout town. "Such a shame," the professor added smoothly. "How accidents happen in the dark, particularly to those who don't choose their friends carefully." The threat was clear, but Rose caught the underlying message. They wanted to pressure her into revealing any connections, any allies who might complicate tomorrow's operation. Her reputation as the Ghost had them spooked, even if they weren't sure of her identity. A commotion outside drew attention. One of Hartford's fake army patrols riding through town. Rose used the distraction to palm a small vial from her sleeve, dropping it behind the bar. The concentrated ether would provide useful cover if things went bad tomorrow. "Quite a show," McCall noted, watching the patrol pass. "Almost like they're expecting trouble." "Just trying to keep the peace," the professor replied for the benefit of other customers. But his hand brushed his coat, where Rose knew he kept Hartford's written orders. The dance continued through the evening. Threats wrapped in smiles, movements disguised as casual repositioning, each side testing the other's defenses. Rose played her part perfectly, a frightened bird in a closing trap. Let them think they were the hunters. Tomorrow would show them exactly who was hunting whom. As midnight approached in Dead Horse Gulch, Rose stood at her cellar window, watching Hartford's men move through the shadows. The sight triggered memories of another night, 10 years ago, when she'd first learned the true meaning of justice and vengeance. She'd been young then, barely 20, working as a scout for Marshal Cooper's office in Arizona Territory. The assignment had seemed simple: track a gang of bank robbers through the Sonoran Desert, but something hadn't felt right about the information they'd been given. "You've got good instincts, girl," Marshal Cooper had told her that morning. "Trust them." Her instincts had saved her life that night. While the other scouts and deputies walked into an ambush, Rose had held back, watching in horror as supposed law officers revealed themselves as part of the gang. Only she and Cooper survived, and that was when the Ghost was born. A noise from above snapped her back to the present. Through the floorboards she could hear McCall's men getting rowdy, their threats becoming more explicit as the night wore. Oh no, but Rose's attention was on a different sound. The slight scrape of boot leather on wood from behind the saloon. They'd positioned watchers, just as they had that night in Kansas City 2 years ago. Rose's hand unconsciously touched her shoulder, feeling the scar from Hartford's bullet. She'd underestimated him then, thought she had him cornered in that rail yard. The mistake had cost 3 good bounty hunters their lives. "Not this time," she whispered, checking her weapons one last time. Her fingers found the familiar notches on her peacemaker's grip. 7 marks, one for each member of the gang that had killed her partner in '75. That had been her first real hunt as the Ghost, tracking them one by one across 4 territories. The saloon's back door creaked open above. Rose recognized the professor's measured stride, followed by heavier footsteps. Pike, probably. They were searching for her, growing bolder as their plans for tomorrow neared fruition. Another memory surfaced. Sacramento 3 years ago. A saloon, much like this one, where she'd posed as a card dealer to get close to the Carson brothers gang. They'd thought themselves clever, using the saloon as cover for their counterfeiting operation. Never suspected the quiet dealer was actually the bounty hunter who'd been decimating their operation piece by piece. "Check the cellar again," the professor's cultured voice carried through the floorboards. "Miss McKenna seems to spend an unusual amount of time down there." Rose smiled grimly, touching the hidden lever that would seal her secret room. Let them search. They'd find only dust and whiskey barrels. Just like that night in Dodge City, when she'd hidden in plain sight while Marshal Cooper's men arrested the corrupt judge who'd been selling pardons to killers. The smell of smoke caught her attention. Not tobacco, gun smoke, recently discharged. Someone in the alley had fired a weapon, probably sending a signal. Rose's mind flashed to her last encounter with Hartford, remembering how he coordinated his men using precise timetables and signals. Boots on the cellar stairs now. Rose pressed herself into the shadows, one hand on her weapon, the other ready to trigger any of several nasty surprises she'd prepared. But these weren't the confident footsteps of men who thought they had their prey cornered. "Nothing down here, Professor," Pike's deep voice rumbled. "Just bottles and barrels." "Keep searching," the professor ordered. "Hartford wants everything ready before dawn. We can't risk any surprises." Dawn. Rose's memories shifted to her first. Successful capture as the Ghost, a dawn ambush in the painted desert. She'd learned then that sunrise was when men were most vulnerable, their night vision fading while the day's light was still too weak for clarity. As the professor and Pike retreated upstairs, Rose began her final preparations. Her ghost-hunting outfit waited in its hidden compartment. Dark clothes, treated with special dyes to absorb light, reinforced with subtle armor plating. Tools and weapons positioned for quick access, each one chosen based on hard lessons learned. "Over years of hunting the West's worst. Still predictable, Hartford," she murmured, remembering his patterns from their last encounter. He always positioned his strongest forces to the east, expecting attacks to come with the rising sun. But the Ghost had learned to be unpredictable, to strike from impossible angles. The night deepened toward dawn, and with it came one final memory. The day she'd chosen this path, standing over her partner's grave and vowing to become something, more than just another hunter. The West needed more than badges and bullets to find justice. It needed a shadow that could move between worlds, someone who could hunt the monsters that hid behind respectability and power. Tomorrow, all her years of experience, every lesson paid for in blood and scars, would come into play. Hartford, McCall, and their entire operation were about to learn why the Ghost was more than just a legend whispered around campfires. They were about to learn that sometimes the deadliest predator is the one you've already dismissed as prey. The first light of dawn hadn't yet touched Dead Horse Gulch when everything changed. Rose was serving early morning coffee to McCall's gang, maintaining her nervous demeanor, when Hartford himself walked through the saloon doors. He moved with military precision, his scarred face scanning the room before settling on her. "Well," he said softly, "this is an unexpected pleasure." Something in his tone made Rose's spine stiffen. Their eyes met, and in that moment she knew he'd figured it out. "Colonel," she responded, dropping the timid saloon girl's voice entirely. No point maintaining the facade now. The change in her bearing was instant and dramatic. Her shoulders straightened, her stance shifted to a fighter's balance, and her eyes took on the cold calculation that had made hardened killers surrender rather than face the Ghost. "I must admit," Hartford stepped further into the room, his men moving to cover the exits, "this was masterfully done. We've been hunting the Ghost for 2 years, and here you were, serving us drinks." McCall's chair scraped back as he stood, his face darkening with rage. "The Ghost. This little is the bounty hunter who's killed or captured more outlaws than any marshal in the territory," Hartford cut him off. The shadow that's been dismantling my operations piece by piece. The hunter that gave me this. He touched the scar on his cheek. The professor's hand moved toward his gun, but Rose's voice stopped him. I wouldn't. Your holster's been tampered with. The release catch is blocked. Very easy to do while serving drinks, if you know how. He tested it subtly, finding his gun indeed trapped in its holster. Several other men discovered similar sabotage to their weapons, creating a ripple of unease through the room. Impressive, Hartford nodded. But surely you realize you're outnumbered, outgunned and out of options. Rose smiled, the dangerous smile that had never appeared on the saloon girl's face. Am I? Check your ammunition, gentlemen. Anyone who reloaded at that gun shop across the street might be disappointed. Amazing what you can do with sawdust and a little wax. More nervous movements as men realized their vulnerable position. Rose had spent months preparing this moment, subtly sabotaging their equipment, poisoning their confidence, and setting up the perfect trap. The ghost, McCall spat the words. All this time playing the scared little barmaid. You'll do nothing. Hartford's command cracked like a whip. She wants us unsettled, arguing among ourselves. This is what she does, creates chaos, turns predator against predator, but not this time. He smiled coldly. This time we have something she didn't expect. The sound of multiple hammers cocking filled the room as Martha emerged from the back, holding a rifle on Rose. With her came 3 more supposed townspeople, all Hartford's agents, all with weapons ready. Your reputation for preparation is well earned, Hartford continued. But I've been preparing too. Ever since Kansas City, I've had people watching every town that matched your preferred hunting grounds, waiting for the ghost to materialize. Rose's expression didn't change, though her mind raced through options. She'd known Hartford would have contingencies, but the depth of his infiltration was impressive. Now then, Hartford moved closer, his satisfaction evident. Let's discuss what happens next. I believe you have some equipment hidden in that cellar that I'd very much like to examine. And then we'll have a long conversation about every operation of mine you've interfered with. The tension in the room was palpable as predator faced predator, each measuring the other's resolve. The scared saloon girl was gone completely, replaced by something far more dangerous, but even the ghost couldn't fight a room full of armed men, or could she? Rose's slight smile suggested she knew something they didn't. Interesting theory, Colonel, she said softly. Care to test it? Hartford's men had formed a tight circle around Rose, their weapons trained on her with professional discipline. But something in her confident stance made them uneasy. The ghost's reputation wasn't built on direct confrontation. She was known for turning situations to her advantage in unexpected ways. Search her, Hartford ordered. The professor stepped forward, his movements cautious despite their apparent advantage. Carefully, Rose advised with a cold smile. That Derringer incident wasn't my only preparation for this moment. The professor hesitated, remembering how she'd managed to hide that small gun despite their previous search. Who knew what other surprises she had concealed, boss? Pike called from near the window. Riders coming, army patrol, looks like. Hartford's eyes narrowed. Right on schedule. My men, not yours, I assume. Want to bet your operation on that assumption? Rose's voice carried just enough doubt to make him pause. The ghost was known for turning authorities against their corrupt counterparts. McCall, still burning with rage at being deceived, grabbed Rose's arm. Enough games. Get down to that cellar and... The next few seconds happened so fast that later accounts would differ. Rose's arm twisted in a way that shouldn't have been possible. There was a flash of steel that hadn't been visible a moment before, and suddenly McCall was on his knees, a thin wire garrote pressed against his throat. That's not how this works, Rose said calmly, using McCall as a shield while keeping Hartford's men at bay. You've studied my methods, Colonel. You know I never walk into a situation without multiple contingencies. As if to emphasize her point, a series of explosions rocked the town. Small charges placed at strategic points over months of preparation. Not enough to do real damage, but the chaos they created was instant. Horses panicked, men shouted, and the carefully coordinated military precision of Hartford's operation began to fray. Impressive. Hartford remained calm, though his eyes showed concern. But ultimately futile. Even the ghost can't fight an entire army. Fight it? Rose laughed softly. Colonel, I've spent months becoming part of it. How many of your men have I served drinks to? How many have talked freely around the quiet saloon girl? How many have revealed their real loyalties without realizing it? Uncertainty rippled through the room. Men who had been confident in their superior numbers now wondered if the person standing next to them might be one of the ghost's allies. You're bluffing, the professor said, but his voice lacked conviction. We've vetted everyone. Did you? Rose's smile widened. Like you vetted Martha. Or did you ever wonder why such a successful saloon owner would hire someone as quiet and forgettable as me without asking too many questions? Martha's rifle hadn't wavered, but now Hartford looked at her with new suspicion. The seeds of doubt Rose had planted began to grow. The patrol's nearly here, Pike reported, his voice tense. Your reinforcements or mine? Rose asked quietly. Sure you want to find out the hard way? Hartford's face hardened as he realized the trap he was in. The ghost's reputation was built on turning men against each other, making them doubt their own organizations. Even if she was bluffing, the arrival of any authorities would draw attention they couldn't afford. Sir, the professor urged, the timeline. We need to move. Hartford studied Rose for a long moment, measuring options. Pull back, he ordered finally. Secure the primary positions. We're doing this the hard way. As his men began their strategic withdrawal, Hartford addressed Rose directly. Impressive first move, Ghost, but the game's not over. By sunset, you'll wish you'd taken the easier way out. Rose maintained her hold on McCall, watching them retreat. Sunset's a long way off, Colonel, and you're not the only one who's been preparing for this dance. Only when the last of Hartford's men had gone did Rose release McCall, disappearing into the chaos of the explosion's aftermath before he could retaliate. Let them think they were regrouping to hunt her. The ghost had just begun to show them what real hunting looked like. Dead Horse Gulch erupted into controlled chaos as Hartford's men fortified key positions throughout the town. But in the confusion following the explosions, none of them noticed the subtle movements of ordinary townspeople going about seemingly innocent tasks, each one part of the ghost's carefully orchestrated plan. Rose moved like smoke between buildings, her saloon girl dress replaced by her hunter's gear. She'd cached weapons and equipment throughout the town during her months of preparation, and now she began activating these resources one by one. Old Samuel at the livery stable was already in motion, accidentally spooking horses at key moments. To disrupt Hartford's patrols, Mrs. Peterson's general store became a hub of intelligence as customers passed coded messages with their purchases. Even young Billy at the telegraph office played his part, sending seemingly routine messages that would bring very specific responses. They've taken the bank, Sheriff Mills reported, meeting Rose in a hidden alcove behind the church. 20 men, professional military formation, Hartford's coordinating from the railroad office. And McCall's crew? Rose checked her weapons. While listening, watching the saloon, waiting for you to return, they took your cellar deception personally. Mills handed her a sketch of enemy positions. The professor set up a command post in the hotel. They're watching all the obvious routes. Rose smiled coldly. Good, let them watch the obvious while we move in shadow. She pulled out a map, marked with her own notes. Hartford's men are expecting the ghost to strike from hiding, pick them off one by one. Instead, we're going to make them face their worst nightmare, a ghost they can see but can't catch. She detailed her plan to Mills. The sheriff's eyes widened at its audacity. That's insane. You'll be exposed. Sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight. Rose checked her timepiece. Hartford's playing a complex game, coordinating multiple teams for whatever he's planning. That complexity is his weakness. We just need to introduce a little chaos into his carefully organized operation. As if on cue, more explosions rock the town. These from Hartford's own men, triggering Rose's carefully planted traps. She'd spent months studying their procedures, learning how they would respond to threats. Now those responses were working against them. "Signal the others," she instructed Mills. "It's time for the town to wake up." Across Dead Horse Gulch, ordinary citizens began emerging from their homes, going about their daily routines despite the tension. Hartford's men couldn't maintain their military precision without drawing unwanted attention. Each civilian presence forced them to adjust, to hold their fire, to break formation. "They're splitting their forces," Mills observed, "trying to maintain control while staying hidden." "Exactly." Rose sorted through her specialized equipment. "Hartford's entire plan depends on controlling the town without alerting outside authorities. Every civilian on the street makes that harder, and while they're distracted," she held up a small metal device, one of her custom noisemakers designed to simulate gunfire. Within minutes, similar devices planted throughout town began firing, in sequence, forcing Hartford's men to respond to phantom threats. "Beautiful," Mills breathed, watching the confusion spread. "They can't tell real attacks from false ones." "The mind is the greatest weapon," Rose quoted her old mentor. "Make them doubt their own judgment, and they'll defeat themselves." Through her field glasses, she watched the professor trying to reorganize his men, but the combination of civilian presence and phantom attacks was creating exactly the kind of disorder Hartford's military precision couldn't handle. "They'll adapt," Mills warned. "Hartford's too experienced to fall for this for long." "He doesn't need to fall for it for long." Rose began her final preparations, just long enough to make him do what all cornered predators do, lash out at shadows. She detailed the next phase of her plan, coordinating with Mills to position their allies. Every piece was in motion now, every trap ready to spring. Hartford thought he was hunting the ghost, but he was about to learn why that was always a fatal mistake. "Remember," she told Mills as they prepared to separate, "when the real action starts, it won't look like a battle. It'll look like accidents, coincidences, and bad luck. The best trap is the one they don't realize they're in until it's too late." As Mills slipped away to coordinate their forces, Rose allowed herself a grim smile. The gathering storm would break soon, and when it did, Hartford would learn that the ghost's greatest weapon wasn't violence or stealth. It was the ability to turn an entire town into a weapon without anyone realizing it was happening. The noon sun beat down on Dead Horse Gulch as Rose made her boldest move yet. Dressed once again in her saloon girl clothes, she walked openly down the main street, seemingly unarmed. Hartford's men watched from their positions, guns ready but unable to act without drawing unwanted attention from the townspeople going about their business. "Brave move, Ghost," the professor's voice carried from the hotel's shadowed doorway. "Or foolish." "Just serving lunch," Rose replied sweetly, holding up her basket. "Unless you're planning to shoot an unarmed woman in front of all these witnesses." The professor's face tightened. They both knew she was baiting them, but refusing the challenge would make them look weak to the watching townspeople. More importantly, it would make them look uncertain to their own men. "Search her," he ordered. Two of Hartford's soldiers approached, cautiously, their military bearing at odds with their civilian disguises. Rose submitted to the search with demure patience, knowing they'd find nothing. Her real weapons weren't the kind they could detect. They were in the minds of every civilian watching, in the uncertainty growing among Hartford's men, in the way McCall's gang was growing increasingly paranoid about which townspeople might be her allies. "She's clean," one soldier reported, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "Of course I am," Rose smiled innocently. "Now, about lunch." The professor had no choice but to let her proceed. Stopping her would only confirm to the watching town that something was wrong. But as she walked away, she heard him dispatch men to follow her, exactly as she'd planned. Inside the saloon, McCall's gang waited with barely contained rage. Their earlier humiliation burned hot, making them dangerous but careless. Pike's massive hands clenched as she entered, while the Hawkins brothers fingered their weapons. "Brought lunch," Rose announced cheerfully, setting down her basket. "Though I imagine you gentlemen might be losing your appetite, what with all the excitement." "Sit down," McCall ordered, his voice deadly quiet. "Let's have a friendly chat about keeping secrets." Rose sat, arranging her skirts carefully. Through the window, she noted Hartford's men taking up observation positions. "Perfect. No more secrets," she said, opening her basket. The food inside was genuine, though none of them would touch it now. "In fact, let's talk about your secret. The one Colonel Hartford's been keeping from you." That caught their attention. The professor, who'd followed her inside, shifted uncomfortably. "See, I've had months to study this operation," Rose continued conversationally. "Months to notice interesting details. Like how Hartford's men always position themselves where they can watch you as much as the town, or how they've kept you away from certain meetings." "She's trying to divide us," the professor warned, but doubt had already crept into McCall's eyes. "Am I? Ask yourself. Why would a man like Hartford break you out of prison when he has trained military men at his disposal? Unless—" She let the thought hang. McCall's face darkened. "Unless what? Unless he needs someone disposable, someone to take the fall when things go wrong." Rose's voice carried just enough sympathy to make it sting. After all, who would believe escaped convicts weren't responsible for whatever's about to happen here? The tension in the room shifted. McCall's gang exchanged looks, remembering every small slight, every time Hartford's men had treated them as inferior. The seeds of discord Rose had planted over months began to bloom. "Boss, Jim." Hawkins spoke up. "She might have a point. Have you seen their equipment? Military issue, brand new, while we're using scraps." "Quiet," the professor commanded, but his authority had been undermined. The very precision of Hartford's operation was now working against him. The obvious difference between his professional soldiers and McCall's crew, too stark to ignore. "Just something to consider." Rose stood, smoothing her dress. "When the shooting starts, ask yourself, are you the hunters or the scapegoats?" She left them stewing in suspicion, knowing Hartford's men had overheard every word. By sunset, that conversation would reach the colonel, forcing him to either defend against her psychological warfare or deal with growing mistrust in his ranks. Outside, Rose gave a subtle signal to Samuel at the livery. The old man began preparing horses, escape routes she'd established months ago, though they weren't for her use. When Hartford's careful plan began to unravel, his men would need options. The Ghost's reputation wasn't built on killing, but on making dangerous men choose surrender over destruction. The pieces were all in place now. Hartford's military precision, McCall's volatile rage, the town's coordinated resistance, and the Ghost's carefully laid traps, all ready for the spark that would ignite the gathering storm. Rose checked her timepiece. 1 hour until the bank's gold transfer. 1 hour until Hartford's true plan would be revealed. 1 hour until Dead Horse Gulch would remind the West why some legends were best left unfaced. The point of no return had arrived. Now it was just a matter of watching her trap spring itself. The bank's clock struck 3 when Hartford made his move. A series of coordinated explosions rocked Dead Horse Gulch. Not Rose's diversionary charges this time, but real destructive force targeting the telegraph office, sheriff's station, and stables. As smoke filled the streets, his military precision finally revealed its deadly purpose. But the Ghost was ready. As Hartford's men emerged in full force, they found a town transformed into a hunting ground. and they were the prey. Team, one secure the bank, Hartford's voice carried across the chaos. His soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, only to find their formations broken by panicked horses Samuel had strategically spooked. Rose's preparation turned their military training against them. Every procedure they followed led them into another trap. Something's wrong. The professor's voice crackled over their communication system. The bank vault, it's already open. Rose watched from her hidden position as Hartford's carefully orchestrated plan began to unravel. The vault wasn't just open, it had been empty for days, its contents secretly relocated by the network of ordinary townspeople she'd cultivated. Find her. Hartford's command carried equal parts rage and respect. The ghost is here somewhere. But Rose wasn't hiding. She walked calmly into the street, still wearing her saloon girl dress. Looking for something, Colonel? Hartford spun, his gun raising with military precision. Around them his men took aim while McCall's gang emerged from their positions, creating a circle of deadly intent. It's over, Ghost. Hartford scarred, face twisted in a smile. Even you can't fight an army. Fight it? Rose's laugh carried across the sudden silence. Colonel, your army's already defeated. They just don't know it yet. As if on cue, confusion erupted among Hartford's men. Their ammunition, secretly replaced by Rose's network, began misfiring. Communications failed as pre-planted devices scrambled their signals, and most devastating of all, their own military protocols turned into a trap. Sir, one of Hartford's lieutenants called out, "Army patrols approaching from 3 directions." "Impossible," Hartford snarled. "We control all the patrols." "Do you?" Rose's smile was deadly. "Or did you just think you did?" Amazing what a few correctly forged orders can do, especially when delivered by trusted couriers who've been working for me all along. The professor's analytical mind was the first to understand. The town, everyone in it, is part of my operation, Rose confirmed. Every clerk, every store owner, every supposed informant you cultivated, they've been feeding you exactly what I wanted you to know. Your own intelligence network became your weakness. Hartford's face showed a commander's recognition of complete tactical disaster. His men were scattered, their weapons compromised, and real army patrols were converging on their position, but he was too experienced to surrender easily. "Kill her," he ordered. "Kill her now!" Multiple guns turned toward Rose, but her smile never wavered. Before you pull those triggers, ask yourselves, who are you really working for? Uncertainty rippled through Hartford's men as weeks of carefully planted doubts surfaced. Rose had spent months having seemingly innocent conversations, dropping hints about double crosses and hidden allegiances. Now, in the moment of crisis, that psychological ammunition proved as effective as any bullet. "She's right," McCall stepped forward, his gang moving with him. "We've been set up. Hartford meant to sacrifice us all along." The street erupted into chaos as Hartford's carefully constructed alliance shattered. His own men, doubting their orders and each other, hesitated at the crucial moment. McCall's gang, convinced of betrayal, turned on their former allies. In the confusion, Rose moved like the ghost she was named for. Her hidden weapons appeared as if by magic, each shot precise and disabling rather than killing. She'd spent years building her reputation not on death, but on the ability to take down the most dangerous prey alive. "Impressive," Hartford's voice came from behind her. He'd used the chaos to circle around, his gun pressed to her back. "But not good enough." "That's where you're wrong, Colonel." Rose didn't even turn. "I'm exactly good enough." The trigger clicked on Hartford's empty gun. Rose had replaced his ammunition herself during one of her countless saloon servings. Before he could react, she spun with the fluid grace that had made her legend, her own weapon striking with precision. As Hartford fell, his own men surrounded by actual army patrols and his operation in shambles, Rose allowed herself a small smile. The ghost's greatest weapon had never been violence or stealth, but the ability to turn an entire town into a weapon without anyone realizing it was happening. The setting sun painted Dead Horse Gulch in shades of gold as army wagons carried away Hartford's captured men. The colonel himself sat in heavy irons, his military bearing finally broken by the comprehension of how completely he'd been outmaneuvered. McCall and his gang, having turned on Hartford in the final moment, found themselves facing lighter sentences in exchange for their testimony. Rose stood on the saloon's porch, once again dressed in her simple serving clothes. Around her, townspeople went about their business as if nothing extraordinary had happened, though now there was a new understanding in their eyes when they looked at her. "Quite a performance," Sheriff Mills joined her, watching the prisoners depart. "Months of preparation, an entire town recruited as your agents, and not a single death. The ghost's reputation grows." "The best victories are the ones that look like accidents," Rose replied softly, "or in this case, like an entire town simply deciding not to be victims." Martha emerged from the saloon, carrying Rose's hidden cache of ghost equipment. "Suppose you won't be needing these anymore, not here at least." "No," Rose agreed, taking the carefully packed gear. "My cover's blown. Time to move on, find another quiet town that needs a shadow to protect it." "You could." "Stay," Martha offered. "Dead Horse Gulch could use a protector we can see, not just a ghost." Rose shook her head, smiling. "The ghost works best when she's just a legend. Besides," she nodded toward the horizon, "there are other Hartfords out there, other towns needing someone who can turn their own strength against them." The professor, now in custody but treated with some respect for his final change of allegiance, called out as he passed. "How long did you know about Hartford's plan?" "From the first day you walked into my saloon," Rose answered. "Men like Hartford always mistake military precision for true strength. They never understand that the best weapon is the one they don't realize is being used against them." As the last wagon disappeared into the gathering dusk, Rose collected her few personal belongings. The ghost never stayed long in one place. Her power lay partly in her ability to vanish, to become nothing more than a story told around campfires. "Where will you go?" Mills asked as she mounted her horse. Rose smiled, the expression now carrying both the saloon girl's gentleness and the ghost's deadly competence. "Wherever there are predators who need hunting. The West is full of men like Hartford who think their power makes them untouchable. They never learn that sometimes the deadliest hunter is the one serving their drinks." With that, she rode out of Dead Horse Gulch, leaving behind a town that would remember how its quiet saloon girl had transformed into legend. But somewhere ahead, another town waited. Another saloon needed a seemingly harmless new girl. And another criminal empire was about to learn why they called her the Ghost.